Monster is another fantasy isekai with an overpowered protagonist who gets a harem, but this time the main character is a goblin. In a lot of ways, Monster is better than the usual generic isekai that's pumped out every season, but it also falls victim to the many common problems of its genre. We're going over all of this, along with its general vibe, to see if it's a show for you. First of all, this anime is a power fantasy. The main character is isekai'd into this world as a goblin, but his previous life was also in some kind of magical fantasy world. He retains a very special power from that life, which allows him to absorb the abilities of any creature he eats. Also, this world has a level up system, which allows him to evolve into different forms. Through these things, of course, he quickly becomes extremely powerful. This leads to him becoming the leader over his tribe, and every female character he has any interaction with falls in love with him almost instantly, as you would expect. But this leads into the actually interesting part of the story, which is the building of the Goblin Society. The main character, whose name is Gobaru, is pretty bland, and there's very little tension because of how powerful he becomes after only a few episodes. But watching him build his new kingdom is actually the interesting part. Thankfully, it focuses a lot on this aspect. We see Gobaru develop technologies and magic with the help of his subordinates, and deal with outside threats. The story goes through each day of his life, so we get a fairly in-depth look at the progression of these things. However, we also see a lot of Gobaru fighting and growing stronger, especially in the first two episodes. There's one fight in particular that was actually very enjoyable. It felt like it had real stakes and tension, showing that this story has the potential to be good. Otherwise, he just destroys everything he comes across to gain more skills. This part actually felt a lot like solo leveling. Another admirable aspect is how the story sticks to the world that was created. It doesn't make things too clear or clean that shouldn't be. The goblins are absolutely monsters and have done horrible things. It doesn't shy away from that. However, this also creates a massive problem for enjoying this anime. This is a mature show, which shows a lot of blood and violence, along with sexual content. Unfortunately, the sexual content is extremely forced and often disturbing. These goblins aren't like generic fantasy goblins, they're like goblin slayer goblins, meaning capturing and torturing women is part of their reproductive process. Of course, our main character can't be that evil, so he puts an end to this. But also, of course, and this is a mild spoiler, but I have to mention it, some of the victims he saved from his own kind start to fall for him, and that leads to a harem. Like a legit harem. I'm not saying this as a moral objection to portraying this, but just in a story perspective, it's bad. I think they are trying to get me to like and root for the main character, but I can't. The whole situation is horrible, and I really want all of the goblins to die. It also has the isekai goofiness that makes light of the horrible situation, which makes it even worse. Episode 3 is especially atrocious, but it doesn't seem to stay too focused on the creepy sexual fantasy after that, even though it's always in the background. Lastly, I want to mention the pacing, which is a big reason the romantic parts of this anime are so terrible. It goes through things very quickly, but doesn't sacrifice taking the time to show us what is happening. Overall, the pacing is not bad, but since we are shown exactly how many days in which these events are taking place, the romance with the near victims escalates throughout the course of a week or two. This shatters my suspension of disbelief because of how ridiculous that is. In the end, Monster has some interesting aspects, but overall doesn't get past a lot of the generic tropes that keep most isekai from becoming something special. Its world is somewhat believable, but its characters aren't, and because it's hard to like or connect to them, the story can quickly become boring. There might be something here for you, but overall, Monster is not worth watching, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in an anime from the season that I would recommend to some, check out our review of Train to the End of the World here on the end screen. That's all for me. Jamia.